Eamon Khan here for Seconds Out. Pleasure to be joined once again by former three-weight world champion Duke McKenzie MBE, looking in fine fettle. But getting straight into it, Duke, I wanted to talk to you about, we've finally got some information, about Canelo versus Crawford, long-awaited information as to where it would land and where it would be. It's now going to be Las Vegas and it's going to be on Netflix. Is this a big win for boxing?
It's an unbelievable win for boxing, and thanks again for inviting me on your show first and foremost. But I'm as excited about this as you are, I'm sure. It's like a dream come true. The fact that Netflix are going to show it free of charge, I'm told, or so I'm led to believe in social media and one thing and another, it's unbelievable, which brings another whole new audience to the sport of boxing. And where better place to start than Las Vegas, which, let's get it right, it's the mecca of boxing. It has been since day dot. And for it to be back there now with ultimately, arguably, I should say, the biggest fight in world boxing is just, it's brilliant. I've got good friends over there actually in Vegas. So don't be surprised if you don't see me pop up over there.
So if this fight, of course, we hope it does happen. Anything can happen in the sport in this day and age in boxing. But if it does come to fruition, the two do meet in the ring, who's your chips on? Are you backing Canelo? Are you backing Crawford?
I'm back in Crawford.
Mhm.
I've been a fan since Crawford, since day dot, since he first became lightweight world champion. And to see him go through the weight divisions, I mean, I'll let you into a little secret. When he challenged for his third world title, I secretly hoped that he wouldn't do it because, it's always nice to, you sort of go, it's always nice to be out there on your own a little bit. Do you know what I mean? I know there's been other champions that have won world championships in three weight divisions or more, as the case may be. But when Crawford sort of stepped up, I was like, oh, I hope he doesn't win. Then he pulled it off. Then he went to four divisions and he's gone clear now. He's an elite fighter. I really believe this fight for me comes down to one thing: desire. And when I look at Canelo, and I've looked at his last few fights, several fights, so I really sort of reading into him, looking at his body language, seeing how he carries himself, see how he wins, see how he loses because he's lost to Bivol. I, you know, Boxing's all about timing, and for for Crawford, he's in a position now where he really can, if he beats Canelo, which I think he will, call himself an all-time great. And that's where he belongs. He's an all-time great. I don't think I've seen anybody move as effortlessly from southpaw to orthodox stance, which he does, not since Marvin Hagler, who for my money was the greatest at doing that. And like I say, I really think I'm not just talking with my head. You understand? I've studied both of these fighters over the years for long periods because they've been up there. It's two of the best modern day fighters of certainly this generation. And I think Crawford, for me, if he beats Canelo, it's bigger news. It's a bigger history making statement if he beats Canelo rather than if Canelo beats him.
Let me throw something at you because obviously a lot of talk is about Canelo and him slowing down, not being the peak of his powers than he was maybe 3, 4 years ago. But Canelo was once I guess you can call it the victim of Dimitri Bivol in the sense that Dimitri Bivol, I believe, had admitted after his win over Canelo that he somewhat fought within himself against Craig Richards because if he didn't, he felt he wouldn't have landed the fight with Canelo Alvarez. Had you in your career, whether it be yourself or when you faced an opponent, felt that you'd faced someone who'd in previous fights had fought within themselves or yourself had done that to land a bigger opportunity? And do you think that Canelo might be doing that to get one over Crawford going into this big fight?
Don't believe that for 1 minute.
Mm.
I think it's been done. I don't know anybody that's done that on a personal level, but I don't. If Canelo's saying that he's only boxed at a certain percentage to land this particular fight, I don't believe that for 1 minute. Once you get into that ring, it's all systems go, and your emotions take over quite naturally. You can't really hold back. You can't really just sit on the fence. And if he's trying to make anybody believe that's what he's done, he's deliberately tried to look quite poor, or he's taking his foot off the gas a little bit just to land this fight. Again, that has to be a tactic he's trying to use because he's on the decline.
Hmm. The other thing is, of course, there's this big fight happening on Netflix, but the underside of the coin over here in the UK, we've now had it confirmed that Sky Sports aren't continuing with their deal with Boxer, which has come to a close, and that leaves a big gap in the sports. First of all, Duke, I'll let you react to that news.
I'm absolutely shocked if that is the case that Sky, who've been in world boxing for probably, I don't know, 40, 50 years at least. They've been the flag bearers of boxing for this amount of time, and for them just to pull the plug, if that is the case, then I'm absolutely gobsmacked. I don't really know. I don't even know what to say about that. I can't see it for one main reason is that boxing now is in probably quite an unprecedented position where you're getting the best fighting the best. So for them to pull out at this stage, I don't really understand their thinking. It doesn't make any sense.
How would you rate the time that Boxer had with Sky Sports in terms of delivering big fights? I saw an interview with Eddie Hearn on IFL, and whenever news breaks like this, everyone has their say. And Eddie felt that the job that he did with Sky Sports and the exclusivity deal he had and riding off of Froch Groves into AJ and such, that was a real high period, and that was too big of a standard, a bar to meet for someone like Ben Shalom, who was cutting his teeth in the industry. Is there any merit to that, do you feel?
There obviously has to be merit to it because if you've got a stable of fighters and they're all, right across the board from British to European to world champions, and you've got all of the contenders also in your stable, and you can put anybody on at any specific time, then that's a feather in your cap. Now, Ben Shalom's relatively a new kid on the block and doesn't have that credibility where fighters are concerned. It was always going to be a tough ask and a tall order for him, and he's done the best that he can. I don't really believe this is anything personal between him and Sky. If they have pulled the plug, I don't think they've gone, you know what, you're not delivering us the fights, we're going to pull the plug and just move on. I don't think that's the case at all. Because, if they go with a promoter, they allow them a certain amount of time to build a stable so that you can turn on the television and identify with their fighter. But that doesn't appear to be the case where Ben's concerned. But I'm sure he'll bounce back. I'm sure, he's already seeking out other networks. I know obviously there's one or two other networks that do boxing. Obviously, TNT do it, Channel 5 do it. Who knows? You might even get it back on terrestrial television. You might get it back on ITV or even BBC. You don't really know what these guys are thinking, but wouldn't that be great if it came back to ITV or BBC?
Your TalkSport colleague Simon Jordan has always fancied himself as wanting to get into the promotional game, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Who knows? Who knows? I mean, what I like about Simon is that he's a good host, and he does his research. He doesn't shoot just aimlessly when he's talking about boxing. He talks with quite a lot of authority as a presenter because he knows. He's done his homework basically. So I quite admire that about him. I like anybody that's actually done their research and then they can speak as a voice of authority.
Speaking as a voice of authority, Chris Eubank Sr. has said that he wishes his son Eubank Jr. would sail off into the sunset and has put a caveat on a potential return to the ring for Junior. He said that if you choose to return to the ring, Junior, then I will return to the ring too. Do you believe that that is something that Eubank Senior is serious about, that he would put on the gloves again in whatever capacity to, if it meant his son returned too?
Well, I'm actually glad you've asked me that question today because I had a chat with Chris today, funny enough. He called me
Okay.
up. Yeah,
Right.
Chris called me up. And Chris Eubank Sr., I should say, gave me a shout. And I want to make a statement in as much as, that's his son. And like any father, you love your son. And like any father, you want to see your son do well. Regardless of what your achievements have been, past or present, it makes no difference. You want your son to do really, really well. The fact remains is that Eubank Jr.'s got enough money now to ride off into the sunset, not look back, never have to worry about earning money again. He's made more money in that last fight than he's done probably in his whole career. And he's probably made more in that last fight than most world champions do, as world champions. he got a fortune for his last fight. So I think what Eubank Senior is the point he's trying to get over is that's how deeply he really believes, he really wants his son to walk away from boxing now and not fight again. He doesn't want his son to fight again. And, you know, like I say, he loves his son. That's his boy. And he wants the best for his boy. And I can understand it. I'm a father myself, you know, and you only want the best for your kids. You just want to see him to do well, which he has. And he's made a bucket load of money. And he just wants him to be content and happy in who he is. I think he was really hurt watching his son make weight, you know, nearly passing out. You know, we all saw the pictures on social media. He's lying on the floor. He's got all the sweat gear on. He's sweating out. You know, he's got the towel on his head. He's got the sweatsuit on. He's done a hard workout. And when you saw him on the scales on fight day, he looked decimated. He looked ill. And, you know, the fact that he took himself off to hospital after the fight as a precautionary measure, I mean, he was totally dehydrated, right, which is dangerous in itself. But, you know, he's lived to fight another day. But what Senior's saying is that he doesn't want him to fight another day. He wants him to walk away from the sport now. And he's praying that his son walks away from boxing. And you know what? I'd even second that statement. I pray that Chris Eubank Jr. doesn't box again. The man's a celebrity. He's got so much money, it's ridiculous. He couldn't probably spend it, or maybe he could. But, you know, if he invested it wisely, then, you know, he could do a whole manner of things with his life. And that's what I hope he does. You know, Chris Eubank Sr. is very, very switched on. And, you know, some people think that he's not quite the full ticket. I'm just here to tell you that he very much is. Mm. And sometimes even when he breaks out into his patois, which he likes to speak, the Jamaican language, you know, he's not a Rasta. He's not pretending to be a Rasta. What he follows is the Rasta faith, the Rasta religion, which means when he says, you know, Jah Rastafari, he's actually praying to God. You know, I don't know if you know anything about the West Indian culture, but Jah Rastafari is God in the Jamaican language. So, you know, like I said, I've got time for Eubank Senior. I've got time for anybody, to be honest with you, because I'm a people's person. I love people. And when I can relate to Eubank Senior, as a former world champion myself, he's been a world champion. You when you bare your soul in that ring, it's something that not everybody gets an opportunity to do, and not very many actually achieve. But he's a 2-division world champion. When I saw Eubank Senior fight Carl Thompson, when he challenged for his 3rd world title, that was every bit as tough as the Nigel Benn wars that he had. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. And the Michael Watson fights that he had. And, you know, that man's taking his licks, and, you know, he deserves some peace in his life now. And as I said, you know, before, you know, I was more than happy to speak to him, you know, on a one-to-one basis, you know, brother to brother, because that's what we are. We're boxing brothers. We walk the same line, and I can relate to everything that he said. I can relate to everything that he feels. As a boxer, that's exactly how it's played out in most boxers' lives. You know, you get a son, and then your son walks on, and then they have to put on their own shoes, and they've got to go their own way. So, you know, nobody really could manage him. Nobody could really train him the way Senior can, because he's walked the line, and he was a hugely successful world champion. And I'm sure he has the respect of all the world champions, not only in this country, but all over the world, because he is a boxing celebrity.
No, absolutely. I mean, what was the content of the conversation, Duke, if you can let us into a little bit of it?
Predominantly about his son.
Mm-hmm.
Something about his son. I don't want to elaborate too much, but all I will say on that subject is that Senior loves Junior. You know, they've reconciled, they've made up. Mm-hmm. He sincerely doesn't want his son to fight again. And as I've said before, I don't blame him, you know, because you don't play boxing. And as far as I'm concerned, he's got out of jail this time. He may not get out of jail next time if he's considering about boiling down to make weight for money, because ultimately that's what this is all about. Should he consider fighting Ben again at the same weight, then it's all about money. Now, how much is enough? That would be my question. How much is enough? Money's no good to you if you don't have your health. If you haven't got your health and you can't spend it, God forbid that ever happened. But let's play devil's advocate for 1 minute. If that did happen, Senior would never forgive himself. So Junior now, he's got away with it. Fortunately for him, he didn't fight a big, meaty middleweight, super middleweight. He boxed a welterweight. And I actually thought he struggled against a little man that was only really a welterweight. You couldn't imagine a fully fledged middleweight, someone like Marvin Hagler, then fighting a small welterweight. I don't want to make that comparison between Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler, because one was a welterweight, one started as a welterweight and ended up as a middleweight. But that's the difference between the good and the great. We're talking about great fighters. Eubank Jr. and Ben Jr. aren't great. They're not great. They're good fighters in their own right, but they're not great. So I don't want to get it twisted. When Sugar Ray Leonard boxed Marvin Hagler, okay, he beat him. I didn't think he did. I thought Hagler won for me. God rest his soul. I thought Hagler won, but that's another topic. That's another discussion for another time. But that's the difference between the good and the great. There wasn't a return, and since I sincerely hope there's not a return with Eubank and Ben, but I'm not going to hold my breath. But I'm going to pray that there's not a return.
Yeah, I won't pry any further than to ask. Just look, did you feel that vow for Eubank Senior to return to the ring was sincere? Did you address that with him?
Yeah, that's one of the points I was trying to make. That's how adamant. That's how adamant he is. That's how fiercely he rejects the fact that he doesn't want his fight. That's what he would be prepared to do. Right. Now, I don't think for 1 minute, not in my heart of hearts, that he would do that. But he needed to put it out there to make people understand that's the depths of despair I'd actually go to make my son not fight again. Do you see what I mean? That's what he's saying. He would go to that part of despair where he doesn't want his son to fight again, and hopefully he'll listen and he'll go, you know what, I don't want to see my dad in the ring. I can't do it. He couldn't do that to him.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of depths of despair, it was Fabio Wardley who found himself in a mire in all those rounds with Justice Hooney at the weekend, but he managed to pull a rabbit out of the hat, if you will, against Justice Hooney and found that big punch that changed the tide of the fight, and he got the knockout victory against the Australian. What did you think of that moment for Fabio, who was looking all ends beat until that moment came?
Well, it was there for all to be seen that, he was getting well outboxed. He was hurt also with some body shots. I watched the fight over several times. He was hurt with some body shots. He clearly ran out of ideas. I'm quite a fan of Fabio Wardley as a person. I've met him several times and I like him as a person. I don't know him, we're not best mates or anything like that, but I've met him. I've been in his company several times. I've spoken to him. I like him. I like how he carries himself. But he was exposed, regardless of what anybody else says. It was there for everybody to see. I made him win 1 round and draw 1 round, and the other 8 rounds to Hooney, and he got lucky. He got lucky. You can't really put it any other way than that. But I mean, you make your own luck in boxing. I don't want to contradict myself too much, but you do make your own luck in boxing. It's a 12-round fight, and the fight's not over until that final bell. So he did what needed to be done. He found a way to win. The one thing I don't like about Fabio is that he gets hit far too easily. He's not, by his own admission, he's not well schooled or well versed in the art of boxing. He's not a boxer, he's a fighter. He likes to fight. We all know he's had no amateur pedigree, which was clearly evident in this fight. And when you look at the bigger picture, there's only so many fights you can have that you can keep saying, I'm still learning my trade, which he is. And everybody's got empathy and sympathy for him. Yeah, of course he's learning his trade, but he's come up pretty quick. 20 fights now, ranked number 1, I believe, with the WBA. So the world title's just around the corner. You're only as good as your last fight. So given the fact that he got outboxed, you know, for 8 of those rounds, 8 of those completed rounds, he got totally outboxed. There are better fighters out there than Hooney, who you would comfortably say would beat him, would beat Fabio Wardley. I mean, there's another way of looking at that fight, in as much as it in Hooney's instance, I should say, you know, it was a bit of bad corner work, really, you know, because he was so far ahead. If they said to him, take your gas off the pot and just, you know, all you've got to do is stay on your feet for these last 2 rounds and you're going to get a decision, you know, then he walks away clearly with a points decision. But he kept pushing and he kept pushing, and it backfired on him, and then he got knocked out. So, you know, you can look at it that way. You can say, well, you know, it's the corner's fault because they didn't say it with him. You know what? He's up. You're 6 rounds up. You're 7 rounds up, right? You know, going into the 9th, 10th round. You know, you're that far ahead. You know, the guy obviously needed a knockout to win. So you don't play into his hands. But they didn't do that. They went, keep going forward, keep pushing him back, which was the wrong advice. And then we all saw what happened.
Lastly, got to end on a somber note. James Cook MBE, former British and European super middleweight champion, lost his life after a battle with cancer. Just a word on James Duke.
You know, like everybody else in the boxing fraternity, I'm still shocked. I'm still very numb. I know James incredibly well. We go back a long way. And he actually boxed my brother Dudley as a professional and beat my brother Dudley. And Dudley could fight, I promise you. But James beat my brother in about, I think he's fought for his 5th professional fight. And I've got nothing but love and respect for James as a person, as a human being. And, you know, my heart goes out to him and his family. May his soul rest in peace. You know, I used to work many years ago. I had a day job. This is just before I turned pro. And James had only just turned pro at this time. And I had a day job. And James came into my place of work. And from the moment I saw him, we made a bit of eye contact. And I liked him and he liked me. We got on, I should say, from that day. This is back in the 80s. This is about like 1983, 84. And maybe before that, actually, maybe early 80s, because I'd left school. And that was my first sort of real job that I'd had. But we struck up a friendship then, and we've remained friends for quite some time, you know, throughout the whole of our careers. And we went to Florida a couple of years ago with the Ringside Charitable Trust. They was hosting a night over there, a night in my shoes, a boxing dinner gala to raise money and funds for the Ringside Charitable Trust. And James was one of their ambassadors. And it was like a busman's holiday. We had so much fun. I mean, there was me, James, Derek Williams, and Ross Minter. We were like the quartet. You know, we went to the gym every day. We was having breakfast together. We was eating dinners together. We went swimming and done all, you know, running together. We had a lot of fun. And I really feel sorry also, you know, for people that know and love James. I feel sorry for them because it's a massive loss. And, you know, people like Derek Williams, because if you ever see Derek Williams and James Cook together, they're like Bodie and Doyle. They're like a couple of good cop, bad cop. They just bounce off one another. They're really good people, lovely people. And like I say, it's a really sad, tragic end. And nobody knew. You know, that's what that guy was like. Nobody knew. He was never going to say he was suffering with cancer, or, you know, he just kept whatever he had, he kept it to himself, and he suffered it. And it's horrible. It really is. But I expect there to be a huge turnout for his funeral because he was so popular within the boxing fraternity. And when you hear top promoters talking highly of him, like Frank Warren, you know, then you sort of think to yourself, wow, that's the top of the promoters. Do you know what I mean? And Eddie Hearn, do you know what I mean? And Bob Arum. All these guys have heard of and know James Cook. And, you know, James was never a world champion, but he had a world champion's heart. And he fought like a world champion. And like I said, I've got nothing but love and respect for the guy.
Very well said, Duke, and everyone at Seconds Out, of course, echoes those sentiments as well and wishes his family all the best and condolences for the big loss, and to, of course, to the community too. Duke, that's the extent of my questions. Already looking forward to our next conversation. Thank you so much for speaking to Seconds Out, sir.
Thanks a lot, man. Cheers, mate. God bless.